Back in 2022, there was a different change down in New Orleans when it came to the city council allowing the police department to use facial recognition technology to go after criminals. So maybe you'll see them on running from a particular crime, and their face was captured, and they can run it by their database and find their man. Problem is that stuff doesn't work. The first facial recognition search under the new policy occurred on October 21st of 22, using surveillance footage to help identify a black man suspected of shooting by matching his picture with a database of mugshots. And the results were unable to match. Low quality photo. And over the next year, New Orleans Police Department would see a string of very, very similar results when it comes to this. And a review of nearly a year's worth of New Orleans facial recognition requests shows that the system failed to identify suspects in a majority of the time, by the way. And nearly every use of that technology from last October to August was a black person. Okay, bro. So let's look at this chart, because by the way, as this chart goes up, I want to point out to you what is that we see there. So of these 15 suspects that they ran through on the left side of that column, half of those, or 9 of those 15, didn't return a match. Didn't get anything from it. And of the 6 that did make a match, half had an error. So in order for them to run these, a human with normal biases and thought processes had to submit that photo, be like, it must be something along that database, and maybe they would act on it. And of course, 14 out of those 15 were black folks. And then 3 out of all those actually made some kind of match, but still nothing really came of it. Because again, it's not all that great of a technology, but they spent tons of money and they sold it to all the people being, this is how we're gonna limit crime. So one more part about this, because they talked about how they have no biases from this police department. They said this department hung their hats on this. I'm sorry, the New Orleans council member said this. And he's a Democrat, and he said he voted last year against using this recognition and has seen the New Orleans Police Department data. His thought was about the system, it's been wholly ineffective and pretty obviously racist. So Jordan, as we go from the AI stuff to the facial recognition to technology using these things with police work, it all goes back to the same thing. Because technology like this is tested, I think they said, with white faces in general, so it kind of has its issues. But then again, it's still based off who wants to submit it. How often they really think these folks are committing crimes. And some of these crimes are actually really, really serious. And you actually want to make sure you get your man. And although they didn't go after folks that didn't commit the crimes, that doesn't mean that they won't in the future, because we've seen that. It's the American way.
Yeah, I was just talking about this the other day with somebody. I used to work with Andrew Ferguson. He's the author of Big Data Policing. And he's one of the leading scholars in law schools on the use of predictive policing, big tech, big data, and facial recognition in police departments around the country. First, a lot of this violates your Fourth Amendment rights, and a lot of people don't realize that. But additionally, you mentioned it, the bias in the people who operate these or program these, their personal bias. And many of times, even if they're not doing it intentionally, there is internalized racism that is reflected in how these programs operate. And that's how you see results like this. These technologies, while they sound sophisticated and neat, they almost always end up with racist results. LAPD had a predictive policing tool that was disproportionately racist. You see it across the country in police departments and how they utilize big things like this that ultimately just reflect the racism in our society.
Wonder at what point people can point out that things like this is systematic, because they keep wanting to push back against systematic racism in our policies and in our systems of especially law enforcement like this. It's just the way it is. So that's our society. So if you want to keep expanding on that and then going to the technology side of it, you'll get the same results that you did before. But it goes back to the same overarching conclusion. They don't care.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.